Hello and welcome to this, my tiny corner of the internet. Before I start, I would like to tell you a story. When I was a little lad, just entering secondary school, high school, for the Americans among you, I had a friend who introduced me to anime, and one of the first anime he introduced me to was Tokyo Ghoul. This friend of mine would go on and on about Tokyo Ghoul, and if I'm honest, the more he told me, the stranger it all sounded. So, Gehenen, he would say, there are these guys called ghouls, okay, in Tokyo. Okay. And they can only eat people. Okay. And drink coffee. Huh. It's really cool, you should check it out. Now this all sounded very odd to me. I mean, cannibalism was never really my thing, you know? After some convincing, I agreed to check it out. Tokyo Ghoul, that is, not cannibalism, just in case that needed clearing up. I really enjoyed Season 1 and patiently awaited Season 2. When it dropped, I watched it, and enjoyed it to a lesser extent than Season 1, but it was solid. Once again, I excitedly waited for Season 3 to drop. Eventually, 3 years later, it did. And well, it wasn't great. So, I have decided to make an attempt to tease out exactly what Tokyo Ghoul's main follies are. However, before I get started, there are some things that I have to say. I'm going to use this video to explore my thoughts about Tokyo Ghoul. That being said, these are my thoughts, and so, they might not resemble yours at all. If so, feel free to share yours in the comments. Also, I'm talking about the anime of Tokyo Ghoul here, not the manga. I have not read the manga and cannot therefore speak to its quality. The final thing that I would like to say is that this video will contain spoilers for all 3 seasons of Tokyo Ghoul. You have been warned. With that all out of the way, my name is GehenenTheFool, and today I would like to talk about... Before I attempt to explain my issues with Tokyo Ghoul, let me first give you a brief overview of the narrative. I've decided that I'm going to play a game. I'm going to give myself around 30 seconds to summarize the narrative of each season of Tokyo Ghoul. Normally I write a script for these videos, but I'm going to ad-lib this segment, to test how well Tokyo Ghoul's story has stuck in my mind. The idea being that the better Tokyo Ghoul conveyed its story, the more coherent my explanation should be. So, here it goes. Okay, so, you have Kaneki, he goes on a date with Rise, becomes a half-ghoul. They screw around for a while, Hinami's parents die, some other stuff happens. Eventually, some weird gangster-looking dudes come into the shop. Jason comes in shortly after. Jason tortures Kaneki. Kaneki consumes Rise and becomes Eye Patch. Kaneki then eats Jason. Eye Patch joins Aogiri Tree because he wants to become strong. They attack a prison for a while to break out some guy called Orca. Don't really know why. Oh, they also break out Jason's brother or something. Can't remember his name. Eventually, Anteiku gets attacked. Kaneki goes to help them. The owl dies, and then Kaneki kills Amon. Then it sort of ends with him dramatically walking towards the inspectors, and Arima opens his suitcase. Alright, Season 3. This one's gonna be hard. Okay, so Season 3 starts. Kaneki has been replaced with Sasaki. I don't know what happened, he got brainwashed or something. Arima beat the crap out of him, and I don't know, he became schizophrenic. Whatever. He becomes Sasaki, he goes around leading some artificial ghouls. They attack the fat lady's auction place or something. Sasaki gets his ass kicked. Some more stuff happens. They all of a sudden randomly attack the weird pervy guy's mansion. Some weird stuff happens there. Kaneki, I think, then turns into the king? Or that might be a little later. There's some sort of strange organization that runs the inspectors. That just sort of comes out of nowhere. I don't know what that's about. Anyway, Kaneki turns into a giant worm thing. They use metal detectors to get him out. And then what the hell happens? He kills the weird guy who was in charge of the strange group. And, yeah, and then they live happily ever after. Oh, and he's got a kid. He's got a kid after the thing. I know that. That's good. Okay, that was a lot longer than 30 seconds. Okay, so that was harder than I expected, but hopefully the results are clear enough. To summarize my thoughts generally, if I were to rate all 3 seasons, I would probably rate them like this. Season 1 would be an 8 out of 10, Season 2 would be a 6, and Season 3 would be a 2.
This is going to be a fantastic show!
Yeah, it better be, because tonight we're keeping score.
Yes, and on a scale of 1 to 10, here's your score so far.
Now that the overview game has been played, I'm going to take a closer look at Tokyo. In a bit, I want to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of Tokyo Ghoul more generally, but for the moment, I'm just going to focus on the main character, Kaneki Ken. and his developments throughout the narrative because I think I might discover some of my problems with Tokyo Ghoul if I do. Kaneki, our story's protagonist, is first introduced to us as an introverted, kind-hearted, and gentle individual. He goes to college, he hasn't got many social connections, but fortunately for him, he has one good friend, Hide. Kaneki, like most kids his age, hasn't got much experience with girls, but he wants to earn some. He is, all things considered, a normal enough kid, leading a normal, mundane life. Shortly after Tokyo Ghoul begins, through a chance encounter, Kaneki manages to bond with a strange girl he meets over their love of literature, and, by some miracle, he manages to score a date with her to a local bookstore. Unfortunately, however, all is not as it seems. Turns out that Rize is a ghoul, a strange human-like creature that must eat humans to survive. When night falls on Kaneki's date with Rize, she reveals her true nature as a sadistic and manipulative ghoul. What was meant to be a romantic evening then turns into a desperate fight for survival. Fortunately, however, or perhaps not, an accident results in Rize's death and considerable injuries to Kaneki. Kaneki is then rushed to hospital and, due to the actions of one Dr. Kano, he has the organs of Rize transplanted into him. Shortly after he is released from hospital, Kaneki learns that he has become a half-ghoul, and so must consume human flesh to survive. With this, the narrative stage is set, and, from here, we get a solid story about a college student trying to grapple with the terrible fate that's been thrust upon him, all the while dealing with the moral implications of being a ghoul and needing to consume human flesh to survive. In time, Kaneki comes to see ghouls in an entirely different light, as he befriends the members of Enteku, a coffee store run by ghouls. As the season progresses, the world of Tokyo Ghoul becomes much greyer. It becomes harder and harder to see who is right and who is wrong. Throughout Season 1, Kaneki struggles desperately to retain his identity as a human. However, by the end, through the actions of Jason, a ruthless ghoul who tortures Kaneki terribly, Kaneki's fragile humanity is shattered and his human identity is ripped from him. By the end of the season, Kaneki is someone else. He's a ghoul. He becomes the infamous and feared Eye Patch. In Season 2, Kaneki, or as I will sometimes refer to him, Eye Patch Kaneki, is an entirely different beast to how he was in Season 1. That gentle kid who would spend his evenings helping Hinami out with her reading is gone. Jason saw to that. The horrible trauma that was inflicted upon him throughout Season 1, him becoming a ghoul, losing his sense of place and identity, and of course Jason's cruel butchery, has exposed his weakness, for all to see. He has come to view his kindness as weakness. After all, it matters little how virtuous or kind-hearted he is if he's strapped to a chair having his fingers broken one after the other. To Kaneki's mind, what matters now is his friends, those he cares about. So, he decides that he must grow stronger, so that he might protect his friends, and I suppose what little remains of his fractured soul, from a cruel and uncaring world. Kaneki decides to abandon Enteku and join Aogiri Tree. The anime doesn't really make his motivations to do so clear. It is implied that he wishes to join to grow stronger and believes that Aogiri Tree can help him do that. Perhaps he's also seeking revenge against the world, after all, he has grown quite nihilistic. It also might be the case that he's ashamed to let his friends see what the world has done to him, what he's become. In any case, for the rest of the season, Kaneki's descent into darkness is explored as he embraces his ruthless eye patch persona. This descent continues until, at the end of Season 2, the investigators begin an attack on Enteku, attempting to kill the Owl, a terrifying ghoul of unbelievable power. When Kaneki learns of this attack, he rushes to assist Enteku, hoping to save those he cares about. During the battle, several members of Enteku perish, but most escape due to their foresight of the attack. Kaneki kills Inspector Amma, a man who has acted as something of a rival to him throughout the narrative. After this, the injured Kaneki makes his way to Enteku, where he meets the mortally wounded Hide. Kaneki and Hide have a well-deserved heart-to-heart conversation. Hide then dies, and Kaneki picks up his body. Season 2 then ends with Kaneki dramatically walking through the battle-scarred streets of Tokyo towards the investigators' forces. At the end, he is faced with Arima, and the season ends. The major issues with Kaneki's development happens in Season 3, but for now, I will just summarize what happens. For the first half of Season 3, Sasaki, the new personality that the inspector seemed to have, hypnotized Kaneki into assuming, spends his time leading a group of artificial ghouls. The inspectors have decided that Kaneki would be more useful, apparently, as some brainwashed ally than dead. In any case, the internal conflict of Kaneki's character for the first part of Season 3 is between Sasaki, the replacement personality, and Eye Patch Kaneki, who fulfills a similar role to the role Rize played in Season 1. In the second half of Season 3, Sasaki releases Eye Patch Kaneki and so he disappears. However, Eye Patch is not quite as I remember him from Season 1 or 2. He behaves differently, he's oddly aloof. In any case, some weird stuff happens and the narrative becomes rather confusing, but eventually this new aloof Kaneki, the king, as I shall refer to him from now on, saves the day and lives happily ever after. The end. I think it might be fair to say this. You can judge the quality of a season of Tokyo Ghoul by the quality of the internal conflict that Kaneki faces during that season. In Season 1, Kaneki is a good character. I like him. He has an interesting internal conflict, and watching it develop is entertaining. I have heard some criticisms claim that Kaneki is a bad character because he is quite passive, weak, cowardly, and other such things. And if I'm honest, he's all of those things. However, I think it's only fair to say, wouldn't you be too? I mean, if I lived in a world with man-eating monsters, mind you, that could hide in plain sight, and then one day woke up to find that I had become one of them, meaning that I would have to kill and eat people to survive, I should like to think that I would become quite passive, weak, and cowardly as well. In Season 2, the internal conflict is not quite as good. In fact, it's sort of absent most of the time, or replaced with some relatively run-of-the-mill, I'm weak so I have to become stronger sort of a thing. But overall, Kaneki is still entertaining to watch. He stops being a compelling character, which is the best type of character, and ends up being a cool character, which is not nearly as good, however it's a lot better than being a boring character. In Season 3, Sasaki is a boring character, and so is the king. But let me address Sasaki first. There are two major problems that I have with Sasaki. The first is that he is a rather unbearable character. He has all the same downsides as Kaneki. He's weak, passive, and lacking charisma. However, he lacks the likability of Kaneki or the coolness of Eyepatch. He comes across more often than not as listless, vapid, and annoying. This brings me to my second issue with Sasaki. That issue being that at no point during Season 3 was I interested in learning more about him, or about his fears of being destroyed if he releases Eyepatch. This is for a simple reason. He is unlikable, and further than that, his character essentially acts as a roadblock for the first half of Season 3. A roadblock that stops me from getting to spend time with a character that I actually like. The whole time I couldn't help but think, Sasaki, just get off the stage! You're in Eyepatch's way! Anyway, the king suffers from problem 1, because he is quite close to Sasaki in terms of personality. The last thing that I would like to mention about Kaneki's character development is this. Each time that Kaneki generates a new personality, he seems to subsume his previous ones. Rize plus Kaneki made Eyepatch. Eyepatch plus Sasaki made the king. The problem is this. As Tokyo Ghoul progresses, it becomes harder and harder to understand who the main character is. Who Kaneki is. Which would be fine if he was all that was changing. But he's not. The narrative of Season 3 is obtuse, to say the least, and it's difficult to follow. That is a problem. However, that problem is often alleviated in stories because our main character is normally relatively consistent. One of the functions of a main character is to act as the source of the story's perspective. Another is to act as an anchor, to give the audience something to latch onto and a perspective that doesn't change, at least not erratically. Kaneki does not fulfill either of these functions, which is fine in Season 1 and 2 because the story is communicated clearly, but in Season 3, it's not. All it leads me to feel is a sense of confusion, which is bad enough, but worse, it makes me feel apathy, a total sense of detachment from the story, a feeling that one should never have whilst being told a story. Okay, so, I've discussed Kaneki and some of my problems with him. Let me try a new perspective. Let me look at the strengths and weaknesses of each season of Tokyo Ghoul. Let's start with Season 1. Tokyo Ghoul has a solid premise. Weird as it may be, given all the cannibalism, it's hard to say it's not entertaining. Its world is dark, cruel, and heartbreaking, but it's morbidly entertaining. If I'm honest, I've never really been a huge fan of dark stories. More often than not, I find them depressing and needlessly heavy. There's a Korean film called Oldboy, and it's an absolutely stellar film, 10 out of 10. If you haven't watched it, I would highly recommend it. However, despite how great I think it is, I don't really like it. It's hopelessly dark. It's just not my kind of thing. Season 1 also has the benefit of a really nice character arc. Kaneki's development throughout the season is just brilliant. His transformation is natural, and his troubles feel weighty. So often, the conflict of a main character is just some generic and banal, I need to be stronger, or I need to get revenge. The personality conflict here is an interesting one. It's a nice dynamic, and it made me care about what was happening. Finally, the production quality of Tokyo Ghoul is solid. Its animation is never breathtaking, as it is in something like Jujutsu Kaisen, but it's fine. The voice acting is solid, and the music throughout the anime is great. As for the rest of the sound design, it too is competent. And that, friends, is not something that should be taken for granted, as we will see later. While Season 1 is good, it's not perfect. It does have some flaws. While Kaneki does have an interesting character arc, he could have been a little bit more consistent. Sometimes his actions were a little confusing or counterintuitive. Also, While it is understandable, I do think he should have been a little bit more active throughout the story. He rarely causes things to happen, he usually just has things happen to him. Having said that, however, it's not that big of an issue. The other characters in the anime, however, are another thing entirely. Most of them, except maybe the manager, Jason and Rize, are quite boring. They either inspired interest in me because they were cool, which as I've said is fine but not ideal, or inspired a feeling of total indifference. Season 2 is significantly weaker than Season 1. It's no longer an anime with an interesting narrative or characters, it becomes more of your average affair. It was a solid action anime with just enough story to make me care about what was going on. Eyepatch is a cool character and it was always fun watching him fight stuff. On a technical level, Season 2 is competent. It still has a gritty and dark atmosphere, even if it lacks the things to draw you into the world. The sound is solid, the animation is fine, and the voice acting is once again good. Everything on a narrative level in Season 2 is worse than it was in Season 1. Eyepatch is cool, but his internal conflict is generic. His motivations are somewhat unclear. The narrative, more generally, is also less interesting. The story feels less like it's exploring the world of Tokyo Ghoul, or Kaneki himself for that matter, and more like the background for conflict between characters, like a stage in Super Smash or Mortal Kombat. The last thing I'll say is that the plot is considerably more disjointed. There are a few interesting narrative threads that were introduced in Season 1, like the manager's child, that were either ignored, danced around, or poorly explored. I don't know why this happened. As I said, I've not read the manga, but I would suspect that Season 2 is either covering too much ground, too little ground, or is being unfaithful. The only other explanation is that the anime's production team just cared less than they did in Season 1. But given that on a technical level the anime was still solid, I find it hard to believe it was an abundance of laziness. This is not going to be a long list. The only strength that I can think of for Season 3 is that Eyepatch in the internal conflict scenes with Sasaki is quite cool. He comes across as even more menacing and terrifying than he did in Season 2, and that's about it. Season 3 has serious flaws. I'm going to talk about 3. The first is Kaneki's character throughout the season. As I've mentioned, he's terrible. Sasaki and the king are vapid and annoying. On top of that, Kaneki's personality becomes so ambiguous by the end that I honestly couldn't recognize him. To put it simply, I liked Kaneki in Season 1 and 2, but Season 3 Kaneki isn't Kaneki. I don't know who he is. His transformation to Sasaki is off-screen, and so feels unnatural, and the king is an absolute blank slate. He reminds me of a sterile hospital room, completely void of any character. The second flaw is the narrative. Once again, I have not read the manga, but it is obvious that something is wrong with the narrative in Season 3, and how it's conveyed. I could follow the plot up until Sasaki gave way to the king, and up until that point the narrative was boring and the characters were unlikable. However, after the king came out, the plot really took a nosedive. I honestly could not tell you what it was about, except in the vaguest of terms, as was evident during the Ad-Lib summary. Things seem to happen randomly, and characters seem to change on a dime. There is just no consistency, and this leads, as I said, to a sense of apathy, which is not good at all. Finally, the last thing that I will say is that the production quality of Season 3 is terrible. The art style changes, which honestly wouldn't be a problem, except for the fact that they changed the portrayal of some aspects of the world for seemingly no reason at all. Kagenes do not look like they used to. Gone, for the most part, are the flashy inspector weapons, and even some of the characters are hard to identify at first. Lastly, on a technical level, Season 3 is just lazy, and I would submit this scene as proof. What is that sound effect? I am pretty sure that I could recreate that sound effect with my phone and bathtub, or maybe even a sink. Tokyo Ghoul is an anime that I really like. However, as it progressed, it steadily declined until it really hit rock bottom. My anime list has a weird scoring environment. Anime rarely get below a 5 or above a 9, so while things are technically rated out of 10, they are in effect rated out of 5. In any case, it is clear even there that Tokyo Ghoul seems to drop in popularity over time. All in all, Tokyo Ghoul commits many follies, but I think the worst is this. Tokyo Ghoul commits the folly of lacking vision. Season 1 has vision. Kaneki is an interesting character with an interesting arc. The narrative has a solid premise, and both are supported competently on a technical level. It has vision and action, and is therefore captivating. Season 2 has action but little vision. The narrative is run-of-the-mill and Kaneki is far less interesting, but on a technical level it's well executed, and so what little vision remains makes the story enjoyable. Season 3 has neither vision nor action, and is therefore a nightmare. Its plot is confused and its characters inconsistent, and that, my friends, is a great shame. Thank you for watching the video. It was a long one and took a while to make, but I am happy with it. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my opinion. I would be interested to get some sort of discussion going in the comments. The Sword Art Online video had a good few comments and I enjoyed that. That was good. There was a few really, really long ones which were nice, but anyway, yeah. The last thing that I would like to say is that if you liked the video, please hit the like button, and if you want to see more, please subscribe. It would be very good of you and I would greatly appreciate it. Anyway, until next time, goodbye.
Well, they say all good things come to an end.
What's that got to do with this show?